Okay, so this week our task was to measure acceleration due to gravity. The quickest way we thought we could do this was to use the Logopro app on the iPads to measure the change in velocity of a ball dropping. We used a few different metal and plastic balls, and we took a video of the balls dropping directly next to a 1 meter ruler. We used Logopro to measure the velocity of the ball by tagging it at different points along the ruler as it fell, and using the ruler itself as a guide of the distance that the ball was moving. When we had the measurements as provided by Logopro, I calculated the total change in velocity over the period that we measured for each ball by subtracting the initial velocity from the final velocity. I extrapolated the delta t to a time of 1 second to find the acceleration in meters per second, because acceleration is change in velocity over time. I then averaged the results for all the balls that we tested in order to do my best to take account of experimental error and consistencies. This came up with a final figure of approximately 9.2 meters per second. So uncertainties. We assumed complete lack of friction/air resistance, but of course that's not true, so that's 1 point. And furthermore, the balls that we dropped were not necessarily perfectly spherical, but they were actually rather knobbly shapes. And while that won't make a very large difference in such a small test, it is worth mentioning. It was a human hand dropping the ball and a human hand holding the ruler and holding the iPad that was filming, which all could result in unwanted movement and therefore inaccuracy of the measurements. We also did a very small scale test, only dropping the balls 1 meter, which took less than a second, whereas an ideal test would allow the balls to fall for several seconds, in which would reduce the amount of extrapolation you need to do, which would be good because it means you wouldn't be magnifying errors. We also did only very few tests, and I ended up with only 2 sets of data, even though I'm sure we did more than that, but I guess I got lost in the interwebs, so whatever, I ended up with 2 samples. So obviously a larger sample size would be much better. Also, the nature of the iPad app means that it's not going to be the most accurate of measuring equipment, but the app itself doesn't give a margin of error, so I don't know really how to quantify that. I don't know how to give a numerical estimate of uncertainty due to the factors above, so I won't, but I thought it would be worth talking about the things I was uncertain about, even if I couldn't quantify it. Alrighty, I think I've covered everything. Hope that was clear enough. Don't think it probably was, but that's alright. Cheers.